Untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Gulf Today on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. In the United States, President Donald Trump says he has signed a bill requiring the release of government documents on Jeffrey Epstein. Trump, who had earlier opposed the measure, announces on Truth Social that he has just signed the Epstein Files bill. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman meets members of Congress in Washington as he promotes deepening economic and security ties. The visit follows a lavish White House welcome from President Trump, who again defends him over the 2018 Khashoggi killing. Hamas condemns new Israeli airstrikes in Gaza as a dangerous escalation, warning they threaten an already fragile peace deal. Israel says the strikes respond to a Hamas violation, while medics report at least 25 people killed in the latest attacks. The Israeli military intensifies airstrikes in South Lebanon, killing at least one person as it targets what it says is Hezbollah's attempt to disarm. Hezbollah denies violating last year's ceasefire, saying it has withdrawn from the border area as required. Australia says a compromise deal will make Turkey the host of next year's COP31 summit, while Canberra leaves the government negotiations. The agreement ends a long standoff between the two countries after both refused to withdraw their bids. US Ambassador Mike Huckabee calls recent attacks by Israeli extremists in the West Bank acts of terrorism, saying only a small group is responsible. He says most perpetrators are disaffected youths who enter the area to cause havoc, and that Israel is addressing the issue. Iran frees the Marshall Islands flagged tanker Talara 5 days after seizing it in the Strait of Hormuz, the ship's manager has said. Columbia shipment reports all 21 crew members are safe, though Iran has not yet confirmed the release. Before we turn to West Asia, we start in the United States, and President Trump says he has signed a bill requiring his administration to release government-held documents related to the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Trump, who had initially opposed the measure, reversed course as the legislation gained momentum in Congress. He announced the signing on his Truth Social platform, declaring he had just signed the bill to release the Epstein files. The move follows comments from US Attorney General Pam Bondi, who voted maximum transparency after both chambers of Congress, now under Republican control, voted to mandate the release. Bondi confirmed the Justice Department will publish its Epstein-related materials within 30 days, as the law requires. The release is expected to shed new light on Epstein's activities and after his conviction. The case has lingered over Trump politically, fueled in part by conspiracy theories. He is echoed to supporters and by lingering public skepticism surrounding Epstein's 2019 jailhouse death, officially ruled a suicide. Let's listen in to US Attorney General Pam Bondi.
What are you doing here over the next 30 days as we understand it?
We will continue to follow the law with maximum transparency while protecting victims.
When you say follow the law, Madam Attorney General, do you mean that you will provide all the files by 30 days?
We will follow the law. The law passed both chambers last evening. It has not yet been signed, but we will continue to follow the law, again, while protecting victims, but also providing maximum transparency.
We're now joined by Gautam Mukherjee. He is a senior journalist and he joins us live from New Delhi. Gautam, always a pleasure to speak to you. Trump has signed this bill, now finally putting an end to the to this whole riff. But of course, we haven't got them yet. 30 days the Department of Justice has. What does this tell you about the political calculation and behind releasing these potentially explosive names at this moment?
Trump was under pressure from his own base in the MAGA, and there were various internal votes and votes in Congress and the Senate which wanted these, the rest of the files released. Now that they have, my question is, have they redacted any portion of it citing national security or some such? Because even though they have been signed to be released by the president, he has been resisting it for a long time. And for him to turn around now, he has probably made sure that there's no unkind reference to himself or his activities with regard to Epstein, particularly since there's been a lot of social chatter, social media chatter on his possible involvement with the unsavory goings-on in Epstein's island and his various properties.
Yeah. And Gautam, what do you make of Donald Trump repeatedly naming this a Democrat-led hoax? Of course, the support for the release of the files has been bipartisan. What are your thoughts about the implications of that for Donald Trump politically?
Well, he tried to blame the Democrats, saying that they had raised an issue which really had no basis. But when the thing started becoming bipartisan, as you put it, it is increasingly difficult for him to refuse to do so. So he has done so at last. And you cannot anymore just blame the Democrats for wanting this out in the open.
How big of a shakeup could this be, Gautam? Of course, we've seen Larry Summers step down from his positions at OpenAI and Harvard University after these email revelations that were released just a few days ago. How big is this symbolically, and does this signal others could fall after the release of this full plethora of files from the Justice Department?
Yes, there could well be, and if there's any reference to Trump himself, involved in pedophilia and the like, then this could be quite a firestorm. They can't kick him out of the presidency now that he's there. He has immunity, but I think he'll lose a lot of ground with his own party and in general, if anything like that is referred to in the papers. That's why I have a feeling that any reference which could be damaging to him has probably been redacted before the release.
Yes, Gautam Mukherjee, thank you very much for joining us as we wait in anticipation of those files being released in the next 30 days by the US Justice Department. We now move on to the West Asia region next. And US President Donald Trump is highlighting what he calls one of the most consequential partnerships in the world, the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia. Speaking at the US-Saudi Investment Forum at the Kennedy Center in Washington, Trump said he and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman are building an alliance stronger and more powerful than it's ever been before. He again declared that under his administration, America is back and America is open for business. Let's take a listen.
The partnership between our two nations is among the most consequential in the entire world, and together the Crown Prince and I are making an alliance stronger and more powerful than it's ever been before. But my message to all of the leaders and investors with us today, and they are the best in the world, is very simple. Under the Trump administration, America is back and America is open for business, and America is actually stronger than it's ever been before.
Trump also announced that he will work to help end the war in Sudan after the Crown Prince personally urged him to get involved. In a social media post, Trump said the United States will coordinate with Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt and other regional partners to stop the tremendous atrocities occurring there, calling Sudan the world's most severe humanitarian crisis. Let's take a listen in.
And I'll tell you, His Majesty would like me to do something very powerful having to do with Sudan. It was not on my my charts to be involved in that. I thought it was just something that was crazy and out of control. But I just see how important that is to you and to a lot of your friends in the room. Sudan, and we're going to start working in Sudan. I didn't think that that was one that was going to be so easy to do, but we're going to start working.
Trump added that $270 billion in agreements and sales are being signed at the investment conference, highlighting a deepening economic and strategic partnership between Washington and Riyadh. Let's take a listen.
I want to thank my friend, a great gentleman, Crown Prince Mohammed of Saudi Arabia, for his bold leadership and deep commitment to the ties between our two countries. Thank you. Thank you. Great gentleman. But many of you in the room are playing a key role in making these projects happen, and we're told that $270 billion in agreements and sales are being signed between dozens of companies, and that's just happening today, $270 billion. That's big stuff.
We're now joined by Ariel Whitman. He's an op-ed editor and senior reporter at Globes and host of the Western Spirit podcast. And he joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Ariel, for joining us here on the program. Pleasure to have you. What more can you tell us about the developments of this new partnership? Of course, Mohammed bin Salman, the first Saudi visit to Washington since 2018, since the murder of the journalist Khashoggi. Your thoughts on how positive this meeting seems to have played out for both the United States and Saudi Arabia?
So from Trump's perspective, I think that he's getting a lot of good press on it in terms of getting money in. He's facing a affordability crisis like we saw in the election in New York City, which was all based on affordability. The polls are looking bad for him, and that issue, he's way underwater. So everything that he can try to play up, people putting money into the U.S., even if it doesn't materialize in the end, which a lot of these things won't, he's going to get good press. And the Saudis, obviously, the Biden administration tried to box them out and say how bad they were because of Khashoggi, and at the same time playing up the Iranians, which was very weird, but that's what it was. In the end, Biden had to crawl back and try to beg the Saudis to pump out more oil because of the Russian situation. So both sides are getting what they want. I would say just from the Israel perspective, because that's where I am, there's a lot of angst here about the fact that the Saudis are getting I think 48 F-35s,
yes,
which Israel was the only country in the region that had that. And we've heard warnings from IDF generals all over the place in the past few days that this is going to badly, severely hurt Israel's military edge, which America has promised to uphold. Also, we know that there was signed a nuclear program with the U.S. and Saudi Arabia for not military purposes, but it's very easy to move something from civilian to military in pretty much in a second if you want. So these are two things that are very, I would say, concerning. And I think the third thing that's also concerning is that we heard for a long time from the Trump administration, number one, and now number two, that the Abraham Accords, the Saudis want to sign with Israel. They want normalization. It was very close. And October 7th happened. But now, and it's all coupled with if they do normalization with Israel, the U.S. will come to their side in terms of military and other economic support. What happened now is there's a decoupling between those two things. So Trump says to Ben Salman, we would love you to sign with Israel, but we're not going to hold that over you. We're going to sell you whatever you want. We're going to help you with the nuclear stuff. And so Israel seems to be feeling on the outside. It's a very weird situation. Also, the fact that they seem to be demanding a Palestinian state,
yes,
or a promise of a Palestinian state in order to get any closer to normalization, which at least with this government in Israel will not be happening. And so we're stuck and concerned. I guess that would be the right way of putting things.
Yeah, of course. As you said, there was calls from bin Salman that Saudi Arabia will only join the Abraham Accords with a clear pathway to a Palestinian state. What does that mean for Israel, especially as cries seemingly closer to Donald Trump are getting louder for that?
Well, with this government that's in Israel right now, the coalition just won't, there's no way. And plus, yesterday they came out a poll, just so the viewers can understand about what the feelings in Israel are about a Palestinian state. About 80% of Israeli Jews and about 75% of Israelis in total, if you add in the Arab population here, are against a Palestinian state and are only for normalization with Saudi Arabia if they don't, if there is no path to a Palestinian state. So whether it's this government, which for sure, because they're right-wing and they have even the extreme right in the coalition, but even if a left-center government would come in the next election, which we're going to have by the end of the year, next year, then even if that happens, the pathway to a Palestinian state is non-existent in Israeli public opinion. And so we are on a collision course, I think, with the rest of the world. We used to think here, and Netanyahu has sold us that he's Trump's best friend, and Donald Trump won't force us into anything, which might be true, but he definitely won't support us in, I guess, not wanting a terrorist state next to us. At least that's the way the Israeli people look at the Palestinian state after October 7th. So we're in a pickle, so to speak, in proper English. I'm not sure what is going to happen. We have to see. But I would say it all depends on the wording. Because if, let's say, the Saudis just want a vague, amorphic promise of, down the line, if the Palestinians do tons of reforms, stop paying terrorists, take care of corruption, demilitarize the areas that are ghettoized, let's say, then maybe we'll think about it in the future. Then Israel could live with that. Even the right wing mostly can live with that. But if it's concrete, we need within 8 years, 7 years, a Palestinian state, then no one in Israel will agree to it, and we'll have to give up any chance of normalization if that's what the Saudis are demanding. So we have to see what they actually want.
Yes, Ariel, do stay with us. Thank you very much for your insight, and you're joining us for another discussion later. We have further updates from the Gulf region, and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has arrived in the United Arab Emirates for a bilateral visit. He will then go on to participate in the G20's Leaders Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa, which runs from the 18th of this month to the 24th. Carney will meet the UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan in Abu Dhabi and discuss the two countries' partnership in sectors like energy, agriculture, infrastructure, artificial intelligence, among others, the Prime Minister's office has said in a statement. According to the media, Carney is hoping to sign a foreign investment, promotion and protection agreement with the UAE during his first visit, as well as announce the start of talks towards an expedited free trade agreement with the UAE. We, of course, stay in the region next, and Human Rights Watch has accused Israel for committing war crimes and crimes against humanity over the expulsion of tens of thousands of Palestinians from the West Bank refugee camps earlier this year. In a new 105-page report, Human Rights Watch has said that about 32,000 residents of the Jenin, Tulkarm and Nur Shams camps were forcibly displaced during what it calls Operation Iron Wall in January and February of 2025 and have since been prevented from returning. The group has said that Israeli forces demolished hundreds of homes and civilian infrastructure, leaving families with no shelter or assistance. Human Rights Watch researcher Melina Ansari has said that nearly a year after the operation, none of the family residents have been able to go back to their homes. HRW has said that the expulsions violate the Geneva Conventions, which bar forcible transfer from occupied territory except for temporary imperative military reasons. The group urged governments to impose targeted sanctions, suspend arms sales and enforce ICC warrants. The report also highlights a sharp surge in violence in the West Bank since October the 7th, noting nearly 1,000 Palestinians killed by Israeli forces and a record 264 settler attacks in October alone. Human Rights Watch has characterized the expulsions as ethnic cleansing, describing them as part of a broader crimes of apartheid and persecution. Ariel Whitman joins us once again for this discussion. Ariel, Human Rights Watch says Israel has committed war crimes in these West Bank expulsions. What is the Israeli government's internal assessment of these claims, if there is any?
I'm not sure that Israel is really looking at Human Rights Watch as a credible source. I would say about what's happening in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, depending how you call it, for me it doesn't really matter for the sake of the discussion. I used to live myself personally in Gush Etzion, which is in, I guess, the West Bank next to Hebron. And so a lot of what's happened, I also was in the IDF in Ramallah, next to Ramallah in my reserve duties for about 10 years. And I can say just in general about what's happening since October 7th, we've had, especially in these refugee camps, which people might misunderstand. It's not that people are living there in tents. There are homes. There is infrastructure. It's not. It's refugee camps because those are the places that people moved to after the '47 war, and so that's why it's called refugee camps. But it's not like. What I would say is a lot of people are. They're hotbeds of violence and terrorism. And after October 7th, there was an uptick in. Terrorist attacks. You had people going to the streets and throwing rocks at cars, IEDs, plans to do attacks with shooting and bombs in Israel. And so Israel decided to go in and try to take care of what was happening there. And that obviously, when it's an urban situation, it requires a lot of suffering from everyone involved. It's just what it is. When a terrorist organization uses civilian infrastructure in urban areas, it'll happen. So I'm not sure about the exact, I'm not sure about the exact numbers that Human Rights Watch gives. They're usually very slanted in my opinion, but it's a reality that a lot of people probably suffered because Israel had to protect its own citizens. I would also say, and this is something that I've written about extensively here in Israel, the problem of extreme settler violence,
Yes.
which is a very small group of people that live in the West Bank. They're not representative of regular settlers that just live there and want to work. They're usually younger, unemployed extremists who just go around and are looking for just having fun and beating people up and burning things and beating up soldiers, by the way, Israeli soldiers also, who trying to protect and keep the situation in the order.
Yeah.
And so that is something that the Israeli government, and as speaking as someone who's on the right of Israeli politics, has to get under control. It's ridiculous. The fact that the Israeli government and the prime minister and the minister that's in charge of the police cannot seem to understand how important and critical it is in order for your policy of, let's say, settling in the West Bank, that you don't have people just attacking random Arabs, is ridiculous. And I and most of the right wing in Israel, the sane right wing, are calling for this to stop. This can't continue. So yeah, in that sense, I agree with the sentiment that you explained from the report.
Yeah, and we've, of course, seen Netanyahu speak about this only today, and have also, along with Mike Huckabee, the US ambassador to Israel as well, who said statements that this was only a small group of people. There have, however, been over 1,000 Palestinians killed in the West Bank since October the 7th. Has the Israeli government done enough to prosecute these settlers? Critics say that they evade law enforcement during after these attacks and are sometimes pretty frequently not even prosecuted at all. What are your views on that?
So the 1,000 Palestinians that died are not killed. They're not killed by the settlers. Those are people that were killed by the Israeli military, the IDF, after October 7th, in all the operations that we spoke about until now. And so I would also differentiate between how many of those are actual militants and how many are civilians, which I don't have the numbers with me, but we don't know. So I would just put that out there. In terms of the Israeli government and security infrastructure dealing with these, I would say, these Jewish terrorists, because they're doing exactly what the Palestinian terrorists are doing to Israelis a lot of times. It's obviously a much smaller phenomenon in terms of the amount of people that are practicing in it, and there is no real support in it for Israel proper. But on the other hand, yes, there's a lack of, I guess, willingness to confront it in the strongest terms possible, because I would say there's a sort of feeling that if we do something too much, we might, first of all, show to the world that we are, that we have this problem, and so we want to, not do the laundry outside in front of everyone. And on the other hand, we don't want to, some of our constituents might be sort of supportive of this in some way or another, so we don't want to also politically do anything. But I think morally and even on a politically practical level, when we have a war and we're trying to explain why we are right, and we are right, we should also make sure that our citizens are not violating the law in the worst possible way and attacking people randomly. It's something that I don't like to talk about, and I love my country, and I'm a journalist, but I'm an Israeli journalist, so I support my country. But on the other hand, this is something that my country has been not willing to confront in a more aggressive fashion, and I think we should. So yeah.
Yes, Ariel Whitman, thank you very much for joining us. I just want to reiterate to our viewers, judging by the latest figures coming from a United Nations High Commissioner that was released on the 13th of November 2025, at least 1,017 individuals have been killed by both Israeli forces and settlers since the 7th of October. Ariel Whitman, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. We now move on to our final story of the hour, and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has said that Turkey will host next year's UN Climate Summit, while Australia will lead the conference's negotiations among governments under a compromise deal taking shape in talks in Brazil. Australia and Turkey submitted bids in 2022 to host COP31, and neither has withdrawn. Albanese earlier this week ruled out a joint hosting arrangement, saying UN rules do not permit co-hosts for the annual summit. Let's in fact listen in to what the Australian Prime Minister had to say.
No, we're very pleased with the outcome. Turkey will host the conference, but Australia, by having the COP presidency for negotiations, will be in a very strong position, and some might argue in the strongest possible position, because we will benefit from having Pacific issues and the issues confronting Australia that we know Australia is particularly vulnerable for the extreme weather events which we are seeing more intense and more frequent.
And that is a wrap on Gulf Today. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.